Welcome to WLNM's original English light novel review with your host, Zeke Changuris.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the WLNM original English light novel review, a podcast dedicated to promoting and discussing light novels with their authors and their fans. We also dive into the why and hows of writing and ask the process questions fans and writers alike just have to ask. So without further ado, today's guest is Doubleblind, author of Everyone's a Catgirl. Yeah. Books 1 and 2, soon to be available on Amazon. So hello and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yes, I will not make you finish every sentence with "nya," but I know someone I could convince probably to do that. But let's see. First, your stories. It's in a sekai. It has to do with a guy ending up in a cat girl populated world. So tell me a little bit about this world first, and then we'll get into the other elements. So what is Nyalia? What's it like? What's this world that we're going to be immersed in?
So this is a world where seemingly every single person that the main character Matt runs into is a catgirl. For those who are not aware of what that is, that's usually a girl who looks otherwise human, but usually has feline features like a tail and a pair of ears. Otherwise, they look human. He gets thrown into this world because he dies in a gym accident. So he ends up bench pressing way too much, and it falls on top of his neck and he dies.
This is why you always have a spotter.
Always. In fact, it's funny you say that. He even mentions as much. He's like, who the hell needs a spotter? And sure enough, he paid the price for it. So he go. And to make a long story short, he ends up in, some sort of limbo world where some goddess talks to him for a little bit. And she's like, well, here are the worlds that you can visit. And when he hears that there's a world filled with nothing but catgirls, he doesn't care about any of the specifics, any of the logistics behind it. He's just like, I want to be there. I want my own harem of wonderful, lithe catgirls, made uniforms, swimsuits. I don't care. That's what I want. And that's how he ends up there.
So is this world a peaceful world, or are we dealing with something? Is it like our world, just with lots of fluff?
Far from it. So it's a very dangerous world, and he doesn't really pay much attention to that when the goddess Leanna, as she's named, warns him of that. She warns him like, well, the parameters on this world seem kind of extreme. You may want to try something nicer, a little softer, a little fluffier. And well, he's so dead set on catgirls, he doesn't care. So, but the world is much more dangerous than he'd expected. A lot of its features are similar to more like medieval or dark age times, where the technology is still kind of growing, but there are some influences on the world that are more on a modern take. So it's kind of a modern meets medieval kind of world. They're still using bows. They're still using swords, things like that, melee weapons. But without giving too much away, that is the general gist of the world. That's what you can expect to see.
Okay. So what brought you into this world of catgirls and tales?
So for anybody who's not aware, Railroad is a site dedicated to a lot of web novels, and it's where I started. And I've been kind of lurking there for, probably the better part of a decade now. And so I started to notice that there was a trend to the stories that people wrote there. While you can write any kind of story you want, a lot of people do gravitate towards the genres of lit RPG and game lit. And after, spending a little bit of research, some time on it, I noticed that this was the thing that people looked forward to. And I thought, what if I just threw a wrench in the machine? Like a lot of people, when they see these stories, they're looking for a character who's very smart. They're very intelligent. They got their wits about them. They know how to game systems. And when they come into these worlds, they find some way to break something. They find a way to break something, and they become this big hero for it. Is what I've noticed, what I've personally witnessed.
Well, so a good example, two good examples of this, I think, are probably Sword Art Online and Shield Hero, are two lit RPG style shows where you've got people with gaming backgrounds in both cases immersed in a game-like environment. Now, my big question to you on that is, and if people have been paying attention, they understand that this is a hang-up of mine. Do you get into the weeds when it comes to things like leveling up systems and things like that, or are you more comfortable leaving more of that to the imagination and not trying to break it down? I mean, Shield Hero is the perfect example. There'll be an entire chapter on how you're leveling up each character in different methods.
So it's funny you say that. So when I threw the wrench into the machine, I wanted to do something different. And while I do some of that, for the most part, and when I say the most part, overwhelming majority of the book is spent on the characters, the story itself, the world building, how people go about in their day-to-day lives, things like that. Matt and the girls will occasionally view their stats and talk strategy, but I have never spent an entire chapter talking about that sort of thing. And it's usually a means to an end rather than what the story is actually about.
So tell me a little about, well, let's get straight to it. Who are the cute girls that we should be focused on in this story?
So to start off, Matt meets Kiki as the first girl. He'll then run into Cannoli, and then he'll run into Raven. And they're all very distinct. Kiki is very level-headed, very reasonable. She's got her wits about her. Cannoli is the cute one. She's a little on the smaller side, a little more lithe. She likes the fluffy stuff. And Raven is the loudmouth, and she's got a sailor's mouth. She'll say it how she sees it, and she doesn't really care what anybody else thinks.
So he's got a nice collection of girls with him for these adventures, and it doesn't seem like, from your description, that we're jumping in with an overpowered setting.
No, far from it. In fact, there are a few occasions where Matt does have a little bit of hubris. He does get a little more hurt than he expected to. So, because he's so caught up with the Catgirls, and he learns. He's definitely more of a character who starts off bumbling but becomes better as time goes on.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the writing process itself. What do you do to get yourself set for a story? Are you building your world first? Are you outlining first? Do you focus on plot first? Is it character development? How do you go about creating that, go through that process of creation?
Well, to start with, like, how the beginning started, I started with the concept, and then I started with the ending. I usually find that helps me work the best is if I know how it ends. So even when I started this 2 years ago, I already knew how the story ends. So that's been a major boon to it. But as far as like my daily process goes, I spend most of the day thinking about what each character wants. What do they want out of this? What are they trying to do? What's the goal here? I'm very character oriented. I always believe that the characters move the story, and that the environment is kind of the set drop for them, is my opinion. And so I'll think about what they need, and I will try to push them towards that goal. I usually like to try and set up some sort of middle ground goal that everybody is working towards. I won't spoil too much, but but for those who have been following for a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I do let the characters talk to me though. So I don't really use much of an outline most cases because I didn't realize that there was a term for this. I'm more of a discovery writer. So I kind of let the characters speak to me about how they're feeling about things. This has its perks and its negative side effects too, though.
Being a discovery writer does have its drawbacks, because
It really
even though,
does.
like in your case, you say you have an idea for that ending, but when you're a discovery writer, I've found that those characters can take you off road and take you to places that either leave you in a dead end or take you far from what you originally intended, and then you either are trying to fight to get things back on track, or you're like, okay, throw the old ending out, we've got a new one coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
And then it gets so much more confusing, because then you're trying to be like, okay, do I have to plant threads back in my previous chapters so all this does make sense in the end?
Right. And that's something that I've had to take great caution whenever I write. I have to make sure I'm like, okay, I'm letting them do this, 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 and this, but I got to make sure we don't end up in a spot that is non-recoverable, if that makes sense. So it's a mess, but it's got some organization to it, and I do use loose outlines, very loose outlines for some chapters. I'll say, okay, this chapter I want X to happen, and then it's usually only a few sentences. I'm like, all right, and this is what they're going to try to figure out, and then I let them kind of guide me from there.
Okay, so that we all have our different strengths too. You seem to be focused a lot on character development and persons, and that probably is because that comes easier for you. I know for me, it's always been the world building. I can create you a world. I can build you a world just like those guys in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
I can give you everything you want. Now, what happens in that world? That's where I get myself bogged down at times, because I'm not sure where that's going to go. So because you're stronger at the one, do you have trouble with creating the rules and the mechanics of the world?
Thankfully, no. I actually find that I am equally as strong as in creating the mechanics of the world, and hilariously enough, the lit RPG functions help that process significantly.
Well, and to understand those things, I am old in many ways. My first game console was a 2600 with wood grain paneling that I got as a hand-me-down from a cousin when I was 18. So I did not grow up playing video games. Yeah, I went to the arcade and we would play occasionally, but you only play as much as you got quarters. Right. And so I didn't become a gamer. I still am not into playing games, but I understand more about them because of the stories that I read. Did you have that game playing experience when you went into this kind of creation, or did you have to gain that understanding of how these worlds work from your reading?
I actually went into it with a great deal of experience. So I was actually one of those kinds of kids who grew up with a controller in their hand. I was 3 years old when I got Super Mario. So it's been part of my lifeblood.
Yeah. I will never knock gaming, especially more modern gaming. I was a technology teacher in high school for a while. And one of the things that I reminded students that is, if you are a good gamer, the number one job, it's not development for people. It's not game development that people want gamers for.
Mm-hmm.
Air traffic control. Air traffic controllers. Gamers make excellent air traffic controllers because they're good at managing spatial awareness and multiple multiple things at the same time. They're good at that juggling. They have a lot of
Right.
built-in skills that make them great for air traffic control. So if you want a nice, easy, well, not easy, stressful, but if you want a nice federal job that's high in demand, become an air traffic controller, as opposed to trying to figure out how to program things in Unreal Engine 5.
Right. That sounds like a natural fit to me, honestly.
Yeah, it was quite interesting when I first heard that, and then I began to preach it to my students, and hopefully some of them took that to heart and thought, I can have a nice civil service job with a pension and everything, and
Yeah.
and not be worried about being thrown out in the cold next time Blizzard decides to change what they're going to do.
Yeah, right.
So, um, so continuing with the writing, is there a kind of scene that is like, this is my wheelhouse, this is what I do best, this is why I write?
It would have to be what keeps me going is my community, honestly. The community and my office and my wife have all been tremendous support to me going through this, because it's had lots of ups and downs, and I don't think I could have gotten through it if I was without any one of those things. I have my days like anybody else does where I just get up and I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I just don't want to do anything. But all I have to do is just log in, talk with the community for a little bit, have breakfast with my wife, and I feel better again. And I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I can go back to this.
Does she get involved in your editing process? Because my wife was my number one editor. She got me through my first book, and I always felt very thankful for that, because having someone who understands how your mind works and can read it and be like, I know what you're trying to say, but that's not what you said here. Does she get involved in your process?
So I got two people that are involved in my process mostly. My wife is involved in my process when I want to bounce ideas off of her and make sure I'm coming off correctly. I have a very bad habit of saying things that could be taken one way or another. And they're like, and they give you this impression like, okay, was that a shot at me, or was he just trying to be nice? And I don't realize that I'm coming off that way at times. So she corrects me there. She's like, honey, you might want to rephrase what you just said there. And, she especially helps because there's a lot of women in my story, a lot of women, and I need a woman's perspective. So I'm like, does it make sense, that, they're acting like this, they feel that way, they feel this way. And she'll usually make minor adjustments, in her opinion, of course. And that's been extremely helpful. But other than her, I also have a friend of mine, Catherine LaCroix, who does a lot of my editing. In fact, pretty much all of my editing. And she edited the first book for me, and she's phenomenal at it.
Well, I always, whenever anybody talks about writing women, I just keep going back to the old Jack Nicholson film, As Good as It Gets. He plays a famous author, and he's asked, how do you write women so well? And he's like, well, first I start with a man, and then I take away reason and accountability. I know we don't get away with that anymore, but that always sticks in my head as well. Well, there we go.
Well, here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. The in your writing process, in your writing, you also have decided, as I have this in red letters to make sure to mention, this book is intended for mature audiences only. It contains graphic scenes that are not suitable for younger readers. Parental discretion is advised. So, is that easy for you to write, or are you like, how do I make this sound good?
It depends on the mood I'm in that day. It really, really does. Some scenes just come naturally. Like that was easy. I could, pardon the term, bang that out in about an hour, and it's no problem. And some days I'm spending the whole day writing that chapter. It's like, oh man, I cannot get through this, but this is something that needs to happen. It's something that I've been putting foreshadowing behind, so I can't go back now. I just got to push through it. And that's what I feel like that's what a lot of writers don't understand, is that you don't always feel good about your writing. It doesn't mean it's bad writing. A lot of people usually can't even pick up on that you had a bad day, but you push through it. And thankfully, most of those scenes are not too hard to write. They usually come pretty naturally.
Well, I mean, that's good, because I know everyone has their own comfort level and where they can get with it. I mean, I know some who it's the best way, the fade to black.
Yeah.
And then next day, and then others who will spend 20,000 words describing the scene. So,
right.
Yeah, for everyone's got their own comfort level, and I am always curious how people decide to put that on paper. Let's see. Oh, you used Kickstarter as a way to get your first book off the ground. What did you use it for? Did you use it as kind of like a metric for interest? Because I have heard some writers using things like Kickstarter to kind of show I have an audience, and that this audience is loyal enough to kick in money, so that's the reason I can keep going with it.
Genuinely, I needed help. I needed a lot of help, because with the rate at which I was putting out chapters, I didn't have the time to work, write, and edit all at the same time. I also had to make sure that I had somebody else who could edit besides me, because when you're editing your own work, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you don't catch that an editor will catch. So I needed to hire a professional editor as well, which is why Catherine LaCoy helped me out there. And so I put that out there just so that, I had the funds to actually get the book out, to actually see it as its best version, to actually set aside time and set aside my work for a month or two so that I could actually get that out to people. And thankfully it was fulfilled and it worked out.
Yeah. Hey, you got to take those opportunities when you can. Because I know some authors who this is what they do. And then there are plenty of writers like myself who, have to write in fits and spurts because it's when they get the time to work. And some of us feel envious towards that. But I always find that when I have the most time, having been a teacher, when I have the most time, it's not until I know there's a deadline that I really start cranking things out. I could have 3 weeks and be like, oh, I'll start writing. And then 3 days to go left in the vacation. Oh yeah, I crank out 2,000, 3,000 words. And I'm like, yeah, feel accomplished.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.
It's having that, deadline that seems to motivate me a lot. Hey, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up here?
The second book is coming out on September 1st. Thank you for everybody who supported me so far. I could not have gotten through this without you. So it really means a lot to me to have everybody behind me like this. It gets me through the day. You can follow me on Twitter, or X as it's called now. And I've got plenty of other social media platforms, but that's the big one.
People still going to Royal Road?
They do. They absolutely do. I still update the web novel about 2 to 3 times a week. I'm behind on a chapter, so I'll be getting that out soon too. So feel free to follow, and thank you.
All right. Well, yeah, and thank you. Doubleblind, we've covered a lot today, and thank you for your insights on writing and sharing with us this world that you've created.
Absolutely.
And to all of you who are listening, thank you. Those of you who are new to the review, please hit like, hit subscribe. It really helps the algorithm decide to put this episode and other episodes in front of new viewers, and that helps the OELN community. So, until next time for the WLNM OELN review, I'm Zeke Changers, and keep reading.
This has been a WLNM podcast.